Peace to the planet. You know what it is. A Deece of the Bishop chilling. And I have the one and only David Frazee, right? The Silicon Valley insider guy who gives us the tips to making money, saving money, and investing properly. He runs Demystifying Wealth, which you should go to right now, demystifyingwealth.com, as well as Demystifying Silicon Valley, right? Which teaches you about how to really make startups happen the right way with the stuff you can't get from college, like quite honestly, right? Because you those guys that teach, they're not in the room when it goes down. Today we're talking about problem solving. This is a big deal, right? Because that's a big point to making money well and just maneuvering well in unsure times. So David, thanks for being on Bishop Chronicles again. Happy to have you back on Money Monday.
I look forward to it every week. It's the only thing that it gives me meaning to each week in terms of what day it is. Because
you know,
it's like it could be like Wednesday and I have no idea if it's Sunday.
Right. But when it's Money Monday.
But Monday I know.
Yes. You know what I'm saying? So, let's look into problem solving because we're always going to have to do it, right? Like it's just, there's always a new issue. In Stoicism, they talk about the dichotomy of control, right? Like making sure that you're clear on the difference between what you can and cannot control, right? And that really, you can only really control like yourself and your intentions, but forecasting what may go wrong is also a stoic, it's a stoic tool, having a sense of what may come towards you. So let's talk about problem solving.
Yeah. So the setup for this was, 4 topics that will contribute to your personal wealth. And we've covered 2 of them. So this is the third. And the lead up I left you with last week was what's the most important career skill that you're never taught? And I like to teach this in the form of a story. And many people actually know the story in Silicon Valley, but it's not that well known outside. So in 2008, Lori Golar was just a marketing person at eBay, and she wanted a job at Facebook. Sheryl Sandberg, who wrote the book Lean In, just had been appointed COO.
Right.
Lori meets Sheryl at a party and says, hey, I'd like to see if I could get a job at Facebook. And Cheryl's like, well, let's meet like Thursday at my office. And so Lori shows up. And when she walks in, Sheryl is like disheveled and haggard, bags under her eyes. I'm really exaggerating,
Yeah.
So if Sheryl, if you're listening, you look great. But for dramatic purposes, give me licenses.
Yes.
And Lori says, "Whoa, this looks like a really bad time. Maybe I should come back a different time." And Sheryl says, "No. I told you could come in, and I'm happy to talk to you about a job." And Lori Golar says, well, wait a minute. Before we talk about jobs, let me ask you a question. What is your biggest problem? What is your biggest problem I can help you solve? And Sheryl looks around her office. There's piles of resumes. I mean, they just raised this huge funding round. They had to go from 500 people to over 10,000 people. And she says, that's easy. It's talent. It's talent. I don't know how to find people, interview them, hire them, compensate them, keep them, promote them. Like it's like I have to hire like 10,000 people. How do I do that? And Lori, of course, is a marketing person, never been in HR, which probably is a virtue. And she says, let me come back like on Monday. And so she goes off and she comes back with a design to all of these issues. Here's how we're going to recruit, hire, compensate, promote, everything we're going to do with talent. And as you would anticipate, Lori becomes the head of HR, or maybe they call it people resources or some weird Silicon Valley thing, but HR. And the rest is history. And she made $1 gazillion, and Facebook went to over 15,000 people. I think it's VP of people is what Facebook called it. But, she asked the question, what's your problem that I can solve? Not, here's my resume, here's my cool activities, here is my, extracurriculars. It was, what can I do for you? And, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this to you, but I used to be in charge of recruiting for 3 of my law firms in the local office.
I didn't know that.
I
had no idea about that.
Interviewed. It was miserable. So I was also in charge of not charge, but I was in the partnership committee and comp committee. And it's just like, those are things you don't want. But I interviewed like 2,000 people, and these are people from like Harvard, Yale, Chicago, Stanford, like the top 10, 15 law schools. That's all we would interview. And maybe 2,000 people. And I only had 2 people in my entire career, and I can remember who they are because they're still friends, who asked me a version of this question. Everyone wanted to tell me how great they were, how awesome they were, how amazing they are, their GPA, their law review. I'm like, I don't really care. Dime a dozen. I did all that stuff.
There's so many people with so many degrees and so much accolades.
Yeah, but one guy who actually worked for the U.S. Trade Representative dealing with Vietnamese trade issues of all things, and was also a concert pianist, which goes back to last week, right? Like that extra skill.
Yeah.
He says, I read about what you do. It's crazy what you do. I want to make your practice amazing. What can I do to solve your problems and take stuff off your plate? And the other woman, his name is Peter Lamb, and the other woman is Alicia Wu, who I still use as in training to this day. By the way, Pete, headed one of the largest M&A practice groups in the world. Wow. And Alicia, same thing. She's like, what can I do to solve your problems? And that is a very different way to interview, because you're not talking about yourself. You're talking about what the organization needs and the value you can add.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's important, man. I think, when you're looking at stuff like that, it's important. I think that question is important because it helps you see into the company as well, right? Because when you start asking questions like that, then they have to be much more upfront. Like, of course, every company knows you want to get hired, you want the money, whatever, but then they've got to be more transparent about what's not working so that you can be better for them.
Yeah, well, I mean, Chris Voss, who we've talked about on negotiations, has a variation of this question that goes right to that, which is, here's what he says you should ask in a job interview, which is, how can I be guaranteed to be involved in projects critical to the strategic future of this organization?
I like that.
Which is, what's important, which is what you just said. What is important to this organization? So, Lori's question is, what can I do to help you, hiring manager, who's in charge of some big thing in the company? And this is, what can I do to be strategically involved for the future of the organization? And, both of these questions really reframe that you're not just a bitter, cynical employee who's going to punch a clock. I mean, look, if we had infinite money, none of us would be doing this stuff probably. So, but if you're going to do vapid drudgery, enjoy it, because life's more interesting, and you'll grow up faster and you'll do more interesting things. So, the cycle you get into as a service worker where you're crappy to the customers because they're crappy to you is vicious, because the more rude you are, they dish it back. And
it all goes back.
So you don't want to be that way. But I care about being a part owner intellectually of this organization. In Silicon Valley, we actually give equity to everybody. Everyone has stock. And this is why we want people to think like owners, not employees. And you remember I told you it's us against the problem in communication? Totally. Like Chris's question is, how do we win together?
Yeah.
Every time I've told, a version of these stories to people who are hiring, people, they say, wow, I wish people would ask me that.
Yeah. It makes sense. It totally makes sense.
And, the interesting thing is sometimes organizations don't know the answers to those questions. And so you can kind of self-help a little bit here. But, one thing I would encourage people to think about is, well, actually, let me tell a story. There's this book called The One Thing.
Okay.
And I wouldn't go buy it because it's like, sometimes you get a blog that some publisher says, let's make a book out of that.
Yeah, let's make a book out of that.
It was totally good at 2,000 words, not 200 pages. It's like the Saturday Night Live, the skit that's funny for 30 seconds, but they drag it for 5 minutes.
Stop dragging it. Right.
But the book, I'll just tell you what it is. The one thing is, what one thing, if you could do it, would make everything else easier or unnecessary? Think of those Russian matryoshka dolls, like the doll within the doll within the doll. What's the one thing that unleashes everything else? It solves problems. It makes you more extraordinary. What is that thing? And so when you're thinking about these questions of strategic value and what are the biggest problems, what you really want the organization to face is, what are the things that unlock most of the value? If you do one or two things, they typically create disproportionate value. We haven't talked about power curves because we haven't gotten to, exponential growth and innovation.
Right.
But, you may hear these things like the 80-20 rule, like 20% of anything is 80% of the value. It's a law of nature and life and science. And, what's true is, for what's not true is the math. Like it could be 5% is 89%. That your mileage varies. But the point is true philosophically, which is most things are power curves. Very few sets of actions produce most of your value. And you want to be the one doing that.
Right.
Wherever you go.
No, that totally makes sense. When you look at problem solving, how do you work to get better at problem solving? Because we want to be the deliverer of solutions. How can we train ourselves to be better at bringing solutions?
Yeah, well, getting a little ahead of the program because I'll give you a short answer, but I'm gonna punt the bigger answer because
no, it's cool. Yeah.
I just want to give the foreshadow. So, first part was financial wealth, second part personal wealth. We're gonna get to creative wealth after this, which gets into how you start businesses, how you become innovative, how you think like a Silicon Valley innovator. Mm-hmm. And I want to give you a lot of systematic tools, not just platitudes like think the best and you'll be the best. That's garbage. But what can
no toxic positivity on Bishop Chronicles, damn it.
Yeah, well, it's just pointless. It's like platitudes don't do stuff. And so what can you actually do tonight that would lead you to see problems differently, solve problems differently, and understand them? And, maybe that's this is a good segue. I'll do this right now. Why don't I tell you about what I think the biggest shift is from doer or employee to creator.
Okay.
Which is, and drum roll, please, you're attuned to active listening to other people. Shock. Right. And you're listening to the boss. You're listening to strategic value. But guess what? What if you're the CEO? Can you do these things? Yes, because your customers are your boss. One of the biggest things I have to teach most of startup founders is they think they know everything. They think they're the smartest kid in class. They think they're brilliant. So their product is great. Like everyone's baby is great, but half the babies are ugly, right? Like that's just, you can't say that, but it's true.
Yeah,
I used to work for a federal judge who, when I brought my oldest daughter when she was a baby in, he'd say, yep, that's a baby. But, the truth is your job isn't to make the coolest product or to be the smartest. It's to solve people's problems. Customers, I'm going to say this really slowly, customers do not care about your product. They care whether you solve their problem. And your job is to build something that brings deep, visceral joy. Not just, oh, this is a nice to have, but something, if I didn't have this, I would be out of my mind. How could I live without this thing? I need to have it. Like if someone took my phone, I would be out to like hunt them down. Yeah. I couldn't go back to like a Palm Pilot or a
You couldn't have a BlackBerry? No.
That's a whole nother story about how you blow market share. But back to so one thing you can do is actually engage in human-centered design or design thinking, which has nothing to do with ornamentation or art. It's how do you listen deeply to customers to understand the opportunity, the gap, the satisfaction with current products, the needs that they have, and what solves something that they really need to have solved. What is the need? What is the solution? So, the biggest answer, and there are lots of variations because I have a whole thing about structured creativity, which I'll get to, which I've alluded to a few times about counterfactual thinking. But the biggest thing you can do is just shut up and listen to other people. Yeah. Like seriously, most entrepreneurs achieve failure, meaning they build what they want, has all the features they think are great. It looks like what they wanted and no one wants it.
No one wants it. It's so funny you say that. I used to work for the software company in Mountain View, and they had a software management tool called Gozilla. They were called Radiate. Later they were called Orient Media. But the whole thing is, the one thing that I noticed at that time, that's when everybody was getting funded by, what do you do? I walk backwards, fund it. Right, like everything was getting funded, and I noticed that trend early where like someone would build a thing. What are you doing? We're doing red cups, man. Everybody's into red cups. And then once they put the red cups on the market, they realized everybody wanted blue cups, right? It was just the people inside that were just focused on having red cups. They hadn't paid attention to what the people wanted. And I was realizing that way back. So you're absolutely right. This is a problem, longstanding.
Yeah, I'm getting a few weeks ahead, but it's relevant here. I mean, there's a myth in business that somehow people who are successful startup entrepreneurs are genius visionaries. And Silicon Valley goes out of its way to convey that myth. We want the rest of you to feel shameful and inferior, just like doctors and lawyers want you to feel that. Like, we want to use language that's inaccessible to you to make you feel bad. So you have to come to us for expertise. Like, we want to feel important and superior.
Yeah.
But that's bullshit. The reason I have demystifying as the word of demystifying wealth or Silicon Valley is this is a democratic birthright to all of us, the ability to create and dream and imagine. And so let me tell you one of the biggest secrets. We don't typically take big, crazy risks. We quantify, we measure, and we stage risk with what are called minimum viable products. I'll just give a brief explanation. They'll warm you up. We'll come back to it in like 5 weeks, maybe sooner, which is, what is the most important assumption? So your assumption was red cups or blue cups. So before we spend $3.2 million and hire 50 engineers, including people in India and Pakistan to outsource the development and do a whole marketing campaign, why don't we build 15 red cups and 15 blue cups and see what happens?
See what happens. Yeah.
It's like $1,000. So let's save the 3.2 million until we know. Like, our job is to quantify the assumptions that are most important to the business's success. Like, is there value? Is there growth? Will people pay for it? Will they tell their friends?
Do we know how to get it to them?
Will they come back? And let's test that first, and we don't scale it until we nail it. Like, we make sure we have it right. So we get data, and we get data by listening to customers. So it could be qualitative, which is they tell us they like, they don't like, and people can lie. Like, they'll tell you whatever you want to hear as an interviewer, which is why you have to be careful. But you measure quantitative also, which is, are they buying? Are they coming back? Are they canceling after 2 months? Are they paying for it? Or they only use it when it's free? When I try and charge, they don't do it.
Right.
So we create what are called minimum viable products, and we keep iterating in fast cycles. Our goal is to do thousands of these little experiments over a few months until we figure it out. And companies never have it right the first time and have to pivot. So the big secret is every Silicon Valley company has changed directions many times, sometimes half a dozen or more. And we don't talk about that because we tell history as the conqueror. We were the great, noble, genius creator who saw the vision when the rest of the world didn't. And you're like, that's not what happened. I mean, you had to switch your product like 4 times, and you almost went bankrupt twice. And so we quantify and eliminate risk, and anybody can do this. By the way, if what I said sounds familiar to you, if you're having like trauma flashbacks and you're sweating and your amygdala and fear circuitry is going off, I foreshadowed next week. I'm going to tell you why, because I just described the scientific method. And most people were not taught science in a way which fired their imagination, which is a crime, because science is the most...
It is a crime, right? I think that's one of the things that's hurting America these days, to be honest, is like the lack of scientific curiosity about almost anything. Like, I do a lot of work at this one school, and the teacher last week was like, the Artemis 2 went up and like no kids even care. Like, they don't even care that this cool thing is happening. We're figurating back and forth. And I was like, when I was young, I remember you would watch space shuttle launches at school and everybody would be involved, and it was a great thing. And like, the fact that the country culture seems to have like not only lost it, but lost even the drive to be curious, it feels dangerous. Like, it's not just disappointing, it feels dangerous.
Yeah, well, knowledge is a liberal conspiracy, and the world is so full of wonder and amazement and things that are more beautiful than the human mind could possibly come up with on its own. Like, why we're not awed by that appalls me. But let me leave the science point and get back to the main theme here, because what I just described is assumption, hypothesis, a test, data. We do it again until we figure out the principle. We've been doing that for a long time with science. And so we apply the scientific method to startups. That's the punchline to how you demystify.
That's how we pull it up.
Innovation is we just use the scientific method. We listen to people deeply. We watch how they interact with products. And so, just to kind of recap the first half of today so far, Lori's question is, what can I do to make your life easier? Mm-hmm. What do you need? What's your biggest problem? Chris's question is, how do I be involved in strategic decisions? The one thing is, what is the most important thing that you could do that makes everything else easier or necessary? And if you apply that to innovation, if you are, say, the CEO or a chief innovator, you have bosses too. Your bosses are your customers.
It's real.
And if you're in a relationship, your boss is your partner. Absolutely. So how do you solve their problems? How do you bring them wonder? How do you bring them joy?
But let me ask you this, because you talked about Goler and Voss. So then, how do you apply that into your own life? Because I know you were doing general counsel work at 29, and that is not normal. Most people got to claw their way up, maybe stab a few people in the elevator. What were you doing so effectively that made you good at that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of branches into two stories. So I was an executive of a $1.6 billion company at 29, which is as a legal executive. So really, I just graduated law school in at 26. So that's 3 years later, fun fact. But I partly designed it. And so you can create your own accidents and serendipity. And so let me describe what I did, and then you can see how it can apply to your life. So I started as a patent litigator, where I was primarily working on patent strategy and litigation. And I used to teach computer science at Stanford. And like an idiot, I went to law school instead of joining all those companies and becoming a billionaire, because I could have, but I'm an idiot. So when I'm talking about money, I feel a bit of a hypocrite, because I could have.
I could be over there.
I could have done those things with those people, but I had a.
You did what you loved at the time, though.
I had brain oxygen deprivation, and part of my
You did what you loved at the time, though. And
I was dropped on the head a lot as a kid, apparently. So in any event, because I knew those people, I was helping them get their companies started and getting them funded. And I realized I'm actually really good at that too. Mm-hmm. And so I started listening, what do you actually need? And, what they all wanted was someone who understood their intellectual capital, what's the invention? What's the idea? What's the technology? Someone where you could get deep because you had a technical background and you would geek out with them and you could help them protect that. They wanted someone who could help them set up their companies right and raise money. They wanted someone who could take their business international. They wanted someone who could help them with labor and hiring people and firing people, because California, frankly, is very hard as an employer, because employees are always right, even when they, hypothetically commit theft that results in a 7-count felony indictment. The Labor Department will still root for them and rule for them, although not a hypothetical, as you may. I'm a little bitter about that 5 years later. They were indicted on 7 felonies, and you still rule for them. What the?
Still.
Because it's California, so employers are always wrong. And, and I can go through licensing and there's 10 different areas of law that a company needs, and they want a strategist. They want the quarterback who just calls the plays for everything and is thinking internationally and globally and strategically, where all these things are just tools. You're not saying, I'm just going to go do this piece of legal work for you. See you later. Here, no, pay me $2,000. It's, here's how we're going to add value, and every decision we make is going to add value. So what I did, long wind up to say this, even though I was a patent litigator by day, and those were long days, I went to people in the corporate group at my law firm, and the licensing group, and the HR group, and all the other practice groups, and said, hey, if you have an overflow project that you need some help on, I will do it and bill half my time. I don't need the hours.
Right.
And I was already a rock star associate. Yeah. I just want to learn it. And so I did all that work, and I was working crazy 16-hour days, which, you pay, you suffer, because in professions, you can't flake on skill. So you really absolutely have to get this stuff right, because it's malpractice if you screw this up.
Yeah, too many people, too much is writing.
So you can't, it's like medicine. You can't just wing it. Some things you can, this you can't. And so I created all of these skills. And so let me fast forward. So there was a company I had done a bunch of work for, And I was thinking strategically about them and for them, about do this, do that. And they said, we're about to hire a general counsel because we're going to go in public like at the end of the year. And we would love to have you interview, even though I've only been out of law school for 3 years. And every other person who applied was like a 20-year corporate partner who was like, I have, been in charge of this IPO for this big company, and I will oversee a kingdom and empire of all these people, and I will have 50 minions that I will whip, right, and they will do my work. And I said, look, I'm going to cut your legal bills to go public by 80% because I'm going to draft the entire statement with the SEC myself. We're going to cut these drivers of costs. I'm not going to go through the details, but anyone's in an IPO, there's things you can cut that actually improve your output, but cut your costs. I went to the head of engineering and said, I'm going to build you a comprehensive patent strategy. He came out of Apple and he was like, he loved me. He's like, this guy is awesome. I went through all of their work across the company and said, here's how I'm going to systematize it, integrate it. We're going to lower our global effective tax rate. We're going to do our manufacturing process legally with all the tools I can bring. We're going to be a comprehensive strategic company across the board with everything. And I will cut your legal bills overall by 2/3 and be strategic and add value. So I'm lowering costs and increasing value. And I beat the pants off everybody else because they just wanted to come in and make a big salary and oversee lots of people.
And you're cutting, you're cutting the money and you're cutting the money on one end and making more on the other. So it's good.
And I promised them and I delivered on the things I could do to add value. This has nothing to do with this in particular, but in Silicon Valley, we have 4-year stock vesting. What that means is if we give you 1 million shares, you don't get them all day one.
Right.
You have to get like 250,000 at the end of year one. And then you get over 4 years, you get them all. And my first CEO is this guy, Peter Olson, who founded Octel Communications, which he sold to Lucent for over $2 billion.
I remember them.
And he was like a sailor with Tourette's, and he was awesome. He unfortunately passed away because he's one of my favorite people. But he wouldn't budge on the stock number. So I said, okay, Peter, I want accelerators of my vesting. So if I help you raise at least a $50 million round before you go public, I want another X number of months vested. If I create a strategic patent program with at least 50 patent applications, I want this many shares vested. And I had a whole bunch like that.
That's cool.
Punchline is I vested all 4 years in 11 and a half months.
Whoa.
Because I did add the value. And no one was mad about it.
That's a lot, dude.
They're like, that's awesome. And we raised $128 million Series C, not 50. And I had over 100 patent applications, not like 50. So we crushed it. And which, by the way, goes to a point. There's multiple points to this story. So one is you have to execute, because if you mouth off and say you're going to do it and don't, you're a flake and you've ruined your reputation. So you have to deliver the goods. Number two is you can engineer your own luck. So if you think about what a career really is, like what are you looking for like in your 20s or 30s? Like you're looking for knowledge or skill, which is the most important thing.
Right.
Credential sometimes, which is actually not the same as knowledge.
Yeah, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. And I think the Valley was good at showing that separation. Talk about that for a minute real quick. Yeah,
look, if you're like I said this last week, if you're a lawyer or a doctor, you kind of do need the credential because like you're by law required to have it. So you got to go to medical school or you go to law school.
We can talk about I'm doing law.
And that Claude's about to kill that, at least on the legal side, but that's another topic for another day.
True.
So knowledge is the most important. Credential is helpful, and so you sometimes do need that. Network is huge. And in fact, some people say network is more important than knowledge.
I think it is. There's actually a book called Your Invisible Network by, who's that? Michael Melcher. And that's what it's about. It's that most people, they think that the way they get ahead is through their credentials, but they don't realize that the people they know and those relationships are usually what's going to pivot your way to the goal you seek.
Yeah, and let me talk about networks. That's a good segue in a second. But so I think you got credentials, knowledge, network, and execution are kind of the core things you should be focused on. So if there are people in their 20s watching this, and I'll say the same thing if in your 40s too, really focus on what is it I'm going to need in a few years. So another moral of the story I just told you is I knew I wanted to be strategic advisor an executive for a major technology company. So I planned all of the knowledge I would need to have. So I could tell the story that I can solve a problem you don't know you have, because all you've ever seen is a lawyer who just charges you a ton of money for doing a project you don't understand and can't see how it adds value. And they're your business prevention department because they get in your way. And I instead am going to unlock extraordinary value for you in a comprehensive, integrated way across the entire organization and do things you never thought possible. So I created...
Hard to hate on.
Yeah, I created the skills and knowledge. And one of the interesting things, I told the story 2-3 weeks ago about one of the stats I kept was how many times after a deal did the other side's CEO call to hire me?
Reach out. Yeah, I remember.
Right. But another stat that I kind of tracked is how many referrals did I get? Because most people hate their attorney. Let's just be clear.
True.
Like, I hate the guy. He's stealing from me. I just think I'm a bit overbilled. It's just all he does is, he just talks at me like I'm stupid, talks down to me. I don't understand the contracts because they're written in 17th century English, like here and after the first party, herein named, herewith. Like, no one talks like that, Like my mom, when she was alive, was a grade school teacher. She could be on a jury. You might want to make sure she can read it and understand it because she might decide this thing one day, right?
Right.
And the clearer it is, the less likely it is to get into mischief. So
True.
In any event, so I did extraordinary things for my clients. Like I basically was shadow counselor, consigliere, marriage counselor, VP of biz dev, VP of finance. Like I was just there to talk. What are your problems? What are you thinking about? What keeps you up at night? Hey, can I help you with these things? And I would just constantly do things to help them. And, in the beginning, when you're a young attorney, like if you have a pulse, I'll hire you as a client. Can you pay? All right, great. We're in.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, when you get the referrals, you start interviewing the clients, which is, do I want you?
Yeah. Are you good enough, really?
And, by the end, all of my clients were international, IP heavy, where they had complicated global tax strategy, international issues, joint ventures, like high growth strategies, like things that actually added extraordinary value, which is why I turned it to venture capital. Cause I'm like, why am I getting this stupid hourly rate when I could be making like a cut of company?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was the natural progression there. But, the point of the story there is if you have a service relationship with anybody, which could be your customers or a partner, really add value they don't even know is possible. And, most people have no idea what's possible if they've never experienced it before. And so, a secret I had, and one of the things you do when you think of innovations, what's a secret that the rest of the world doesn't have, is an integrated cross-practice, cross-border strategy with all these different axes like IP, corporate, litigation. If you could do that, people would forever love you.
Yeah.
And if you go the extra mile for people, like this is a true story. So one of my clients, he was this young guy at the time who was this up and coming engineer in the telecommunications space. And he bought a Ford Explorer from this dealer in Texas. And the dealer told him in writing, this is California certified for emissions. And so when he drove it into California, DMV said, we're not going to give you tags because it's not California certified. Sorry. And the dealer wouldn't take it back.
Wow.
Nothing to do with technology or patents. Notice this is a car.
Right.
And so, a friend of mine who was a former executive for me from that company I mentioned where I was general counsel said, you should help this kid. He's up and coming and he really could need your help. And so I went to war for that kid. And not only did I get the dealer to take it back, I got him a $5,000 extra payment. And a true story, in the settlement agreement, there's a provision that says I, by name, David Frazee, am not allowed within 500 yards of that dealership.
So you did a great job, essentially.
And so here's why I tell the story today, not just because he told everybody he knew I love my lawyer. I love this guy.
Guy's amazing.
And I think he's probably, when I was still a lawyer, like he probably referred to me about $20 million of business over his career.
Dang.
because at a party when people are like, man, my lawyer sucks. He's like, are you kidding? My guy's awesome. And he made a dealer take a car back, and everyone hates car dealers, right?
Yeah.
And so, one thing and it wasn't just him, like when there are, cause I just want to do good deeds for people anyway, cause it's kind of the way I roll. Like I have that Boy Scout kind of thing in me.
True.
But when like a CFO would be fired from a company, I'd say, well, give me your resume. I'll send it out to my other clients and the VCs I work with. And maybe nothing would happen, but they'd remember that.
They remember that in that clutch moment, you tried to get him some daylight.
And so, there's Eric Clapton has a song, Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out. It was on, I used to like Clapton before I knew he was racist, which is ironic because he covered music of black people. So that's
I know.
But, I think it was originally Jimmy Cox and then Bessie Smith or the more, but anyway, the point, it isn't, we don't need to go on through Clapton, but one of the lines in that is, when you're down and out, no one knows who you are. You're just nobody. But when you're back on your feet, you're everybody's long lost friend.
Yeah, buddy.
And so one of the things I would teach like young associates in my law firm is if you want to grow up with people and you want people loyal to you, you be loyal to them when they need it. People remember who was there when nobody else was.
Yo, that's real. I know that's a big factor in my life, especially in this phase. Right? Like, like the kind of stragglers who just check in to check in. They're not really trying to help. They're not really trying to like help you expand or plug you to nothing or give you any wisdom that's actionable. Like that's a big deal. When you're down, the people who are like, I got you. I may know somebody. Here's a tool. Here's a hand to pull up. I love it.
Yeah. And so, this all ties, this isn't just random stories, although they're worth telling, but
they're great stories.
So how did we get here? We got here because we talked about network being one of the valuable career skills. And so the way you build a network is you help people when they need it, not when it's convenient to you, not when you need something from them.
So
they'll never forget you. And people will do that for you too. And as a weird corollary to that, this is a Benjamin Franklin trick. So when someone didn't like him, like there was some like person in the Colonial Assembly, Franklin would ask them for a favor. He's like, I would like to borrow that rare book you have and read it because you're the only one in the colonies that has it. May I please borrow it? I'll care for it. And even this person just hated Benjamin Franklin and they did not get along because Benjamin Franklin was not like a nice guy. But I mean,
he seemed like he was very unusual.
He had two slave owners, dealt with young women.
Yeah.
He wouldn't, me too, he would not make it today.
No, dude.
But in any event, but he would create this sense of moral debt in people. He didn't even do anything for them. He asked them to do something for him. Let me borrow this book. And so we are humans. We are mammals. I've mentioned that a few times. And when we incur debt to each other, it enforces social bonding and social network and mutual protection and obligation. And so when you're helping people or seeking help from people, you're building network. And I also told the story when I was telling you about listening about, someone I know who hated cocktail parties. Like he had to go because of his wife. And he went from crawling up the walls to being the most interesting man. Like the Dos Equis man was nobody to this guy. And he didn't say anything. He just listened. So if you just listen to people's problems and hear them, and eventually you'll find serendipity. Like I did this as a young associate at my law firm, which is what keeps you up at night. Like, hey, I'm not going to bill you for this. I just want to know, can you go to lunch? I just want to know, what are your threats? What are your fears? What's going on? What are the bottlenecks? Right. And then like 3 months later, I'd say, hey, you remember 3 months ago, you told me this was your biggest issue? Well, I just met an entrepreneur that has the technology. Do you mind if I introduce you?
Yeah. And now they're happy that you're thinking about them.
And that, but you can't do that if you don't have the raw stuff, which is knowledge. And so you have to just give a damn. Again, most people see work as evil and it's the man with his boot on your throat. And maybe that's all true. However, you need to eat. And if you start giving a damn and caring and people know, it doesn't cost you anything. Like there's certain things that are free, right? Like showing up on time, not being a jackass, not having a surly attitude, listening to people. Like these things don't effort. Like none of this costs you anything. And it makes your life more interesting and rich, and you will fly up whatever profession or career you are in when people know they can count on you and you're thinking like someone who wants the organization to be successful and you want other people to be successful. Leaders authority and leadership are different. I don't know if I specifically made that point. If I did, I'm sorry to repeat. But
No, you didn't. You didn't. That's a good
the fact you have authority over someone doesn't mean you're a leader. You can lead from
Right.
behind. You can lead laterally. People will follow you. People think you have their back.
real.
That's leadership. And so if you want to build that network, you want to solve problems, you want them to allow you to solve the problems, you need to be in a position where they think of you. And I don't know if this has been specifically studied, but anecdotally, I think I'm going to put the number like 80% of job postings, they already have someone who's going to take it.
Yeah, man. Don't get me started on LinkedIn, because that's one of the things that I'm just like, whatever LinkedIn started to be, that's the whole game now. Like a lot of times people are just posting stuff to show proof of life.
Well,
right?
they have to
They
for
already
legal
have
stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's like, I totally get that. But like, I get it. You're talking about solving problems, but like, doesn't that apply like beyond your boss? Like, how do you make that wrap around to customers too, so it's not just in-house?
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I talked about earlier with you center the customer in all of your customer, you create a customer journey, which is, I think the theme for today is this is the same skill, which is seeing big problems, deeply listening to everyone, and letting people know that you can be relied upon to be there when it matters.
Right.
And if you do those things, it doesn't matter what your career is, what your job is, you will find yourself succeeding at a faster rate. And if you want to be the boss, you have a good chance of doing it within that structure, or you can start your own company. So these are the same skills. So, again, what's your biggest problem? How am I in the most important strategic decisions? What is the customer looking to have solved? Am I deeply listening? Am I helping people? Am I adding value? Am I creating my own forms of luck? One of the things I always say to people is, where do you want to be in 5 or 10 years? What kinds of problems do you want to think about and solve? What do you want to wake up thinking about? And design your life around that. Because most people just do what they're given. I mean, I'll go back to law firm for a second. So, they let me train the associates, which, silly firm management. But one of the things I would say is, look, most of you aren't going to be partner here. Like maybe 1 out of 10. You won't make it. And it's not just because you won't be good. You don't want it. So what do you want? Do you want to be a general counsel?
What is driving you?
Do you want to be work for a nonprofit? Do you want to be an academic and teach at a law school? Do you want to be in-house? Because you would do different skills. Do the skills that will get you what it is you need to have the knowledge to do the thing you want. And skills are liquid choice that are optionality later. Networks are liquid choice that are optionality later. It creates opportunity. All these things generate opportunities. And you kind of need them all. I mean, there are people with no skills and tons of networks that do great, and people with lots of skills with kind of crappy network that become specialists and kind of do okay. Yeah. But if you do all of these things, you will greatly compound your chance of success.
I love that, man. I love that. This has been such an awesome talk, dude.
But it's all about, again, listening. I know it sounds like I truly, I've supervised so many attorneys and I've invested in so many entrepreneurs and mentored so many entrepreneurs and some of the most creative people. And most of them don't do this stuff very well. And those are the best, most educated, allegedly smartest people on the planet.
Why do you think they don't? Do you think they don't see it? Is it that they're self-centered? Like back to kind of the red cup theory? Is that what it is? Or is it that they're just trying to stick to the playbook they were given from the university? So they don't want to break the mold out of, risk of looking bad or.
Yeah. I actually think, it's an interesting question. So I think about what I would have said pre-COVID is that people who are not afraid to be wrong, who are lesser elite educated, tend to do better. Since COVID, no one gives a damn.
That's true.
The entire service sector's gone off the cliff, in my opinion. I just can't fathom how people are so rude and so apathetic. However, without making, I sound like kids these days. I don't want to sound like one of those guys, but let me just make some potentially contradictory observations. So caring, wherever you are always helps and will get you a long way, because people want to be sympathetic and like you and want to make you successful, and they really do. What can I do to be promoted? What can I do to be more strategic? What can I do to help you better? One thing about more educated in the sense of like traditional education is you achieve by not being wrong, and you are beaten into being afraid of being wrong.
Right.
And this is a few weeks ahead, but one of the greatest barriers to creativity is that you're too brittle and you don't take risk. And we talked about like last week, like you have to have challenged failure, not so overwhelming you can't do it and you shut down, but you need to constantly be challenged and you need to lose sometimes. And, not necessarily 50-50, but you need equilibrium in challenge and ability. So you're constantly being pushed. And what I find, like when I think about, like I work on 24 IPOs as a lawyer, and then I have obviously a bunch of billion-dollar companies in my portfolio. Like very, very, very few are elite college educated. From Illinois State or, Santa Barbara, or they can go to college at all, or SUNY Stony Brook. Or maybe after 2 years or community college. The people who can't gamble and take risks and fail miss out. They're taught I have to be right.
Yeah.
And that's why doctors make terrible entrepreneurs and academics make terrible entrepreneurs, because they're taught to be right. They got where they are by always being right and never being wrong and being afraid of being wrong. Where the people who are like, I'll try it, what the heck, do much better in life.
Let's see. Yeah. Because they've got a more flexible mind, and they can acknowledge maybe that there's an untapped potential somewhere in their world that they haven't really got to sit with.
They'll ask questions. It's like the emperor has no clothes story. Like everyone else wanted to pretend they saw what was there, but the kid's like, hey, the emperor's naked, man. Like they'll say the obvious. They'll do, like they can just ask basic questions and try things. That's an important skill for innovation. It's an important skill for career. So, 100%. But again, everything here the last few weeks has been about how do you actually deeply listen. You don't get the career you plan, you get the career you earn. And that's you can go into the stratosphere if you solve problems other people don't see or won't touch.
Dude, this is why I love Money Mondays, man. Thank you so much. I will see you next week. Any final thoughts before we go?
So next week concludes the 4 parts about the personal wealth.
Right.
And I'm going to make a case, because you're thinking, why is trauma, poverty, and what they do to your brain have to do with personal wealth? And if I can't make that case to people next week, then I have failed. But a lot of the things that I've talked about for the last 3 or 4 months, financially and career and personal wealth, are unavailable to you if you have a scarcity and poverty mindset. And it's not a moral failing. It's not what's wrong with you. It's what happened to you. And I think all of us have a moral responsibility to start thinking about how to be our better selves and help everybody have these tools.
Dude.
So with that, that's my segue for next week. So please don't check out on next Monday because you think it's nothing to do with this. Seriously. I include it for a reason. I don't do things lightly. So
we know this. So go visit Demystifying Silicon Valley. Go visit Demystifying Wealth, and do not miss the next Money Monday, because this knowledge keeps rolling, and we're happy to have you with us. Thank you for coming to Bishop Chronicles, and have a fantastic week. West Said, we're out.